I've been asked to speak about reincarnation, and that also implies past lives, and that also implies the terminology I personally like, which is other lives. So here's the thing: the majority of the human beings on this planet, primarily informed by their religion, have the idea that they have lived before some other life. So what I'm saying for a Western audience is something that might be a little different. However, in most parts of the world this is taken as axiomatic. It's just accepted fact that all human beings have experienced other lifetimes. Well, there's nothing like the exception to prove the rule, because I have actually had the pleasure of knowing one human being who really didn't have any previous lives, but the rest of the human beings I've encountered, including myself, have lived many, many lives. So my personal interest in past lives is all to do with the subject of healing, in enabling people to feel better and to be able to live a more useful life. And so I want to make this clear right at the start, which is, generally speaking, and this is a good reason to do so, the important thing is simply to accept that you've lived other lives before, and you don't really need to go into them in any great detail, because yes, your primary focus is to be alive in this life. That's really the purpose, is to simply be here now, enjoy your life and live it. However, for some people it's just not as simple as that, and there's some wonderful cases which you can examine through various different forms of archives, documentaries over the last 40 years, whereby you come across someone who's, say, a 3-year-old child who then gets a connection with another life that they've lived, and they drag their parents over to some stranger's house and say, I used to be married to this person. There are many, many examples of all this, and I suggest you do your own research to find them. So suffice it to say, there are many examples of people who are living this life, often as very young children, who have a very detailed memory of other life or other lives they've lived. So I think that's useful just to take into account. However, the bit that really concerns me are the people, I would definitely include myself in this in my own healing journey, who come to the conclusion that, hey, there's more to it than meets the eye. If I just work on the healing in this life, it's just not doing it. There's something else which is bothering me. And so this is really where my interest in the subject comes in. So now I go back to my study of human history, which is just an incredible catalogue of violence, atrocity, war, famine, plague, you name it. We've just gone through so much as a human race since our inception on this planet. And what is particularly interesting is that you find actual physical evidence of things that people have been through before. The most simple example of all is when you come across a person with a birthmark. Now, birthmarks literally give us the evidence of what's happened. So sometimes you'll find a birthmark which is exactly the right shape and position that would account for a person having a previous life where they were impaled in some way. Could have been stabbed with a sword or a spear or a lance or some other device. So you find all sorts of interesting physical evidences which literally are the body's way of saying, hey, look, there's a past life here that's so significant, we're going to make it really blindingly obvious to you by giving you some physical evidence that you can see on your body. So here's the other thing I want to draw out, which is sometimes one of the reasons why a person might go through a lot of difficulty in this life is to do with really clearing up all the mess from other lives. So sometimes I will come across an example of a person who's been through an incredible catalogue of illnesses, and you can see when you go into the detail that all those illnesses actually have been releases for events and incidents which had gone on before. Having worked with the USR for over 4 years now, there have been frequent cases where I have been given exact details and information about a person's previous life, and always the information is relevant for their situation today. So this is really the bit I want to focus in on most of all. So what personally fascinates me about these other lives we've lived is when a person has lived one life before, or even many lives before, where the same theme was being echoed and the particular problem was manifested. I'll give you a simple example, which is there's a person having a problem with a relationship in the present time. They ask for a USR and I go off and do the work, and I discover 6 lifetimes where that person has actually had a relationship with the same person in each of those 6 lifetimes, and each time they come up against the same problem. Some kind of a conflict, some kind of a difficulty arises. And the reason why I'm having to share this information with them today is because what went on in other lifetimes is actually affecting these people today. So this is where it starts to get really interesting, and I find that when I do the universal soul retrieval for the person in that particular case, and we retrieve the lost soul parts from those traumas and we return them to the person, that's when the real breakthrough happens, because we're literally healing the trauma from the past lives. Now, the brand new piece of work I'm offering everyone, which is the grief and guilt release process, is another example of where past lives are influencing a person, and the influence is in a slightly different way. So in this particular case with the grief and guilt release, we're not having the problem about lost packets of energy, because we deal with those universal soul retrieval. What we talk about now is a situation where a person is manifesting a lot of very difficult, heavy, negative emotions in their present lifetime, which they simply have been unable, through every single means they've attempted, to get rid of or to release. And it is a big problem for those people affected by it. So you can imagine if you had an experience with another person in another lifetime and it all became very dramatic and very challenging and disturbing, and you did something that you felt really bad about. Perhaps you took the person's life, perhaps you betrayed them in some way, or maybe you were given a commission to do and you let them down totally. You can imagine that something like this from another lifetime, if it's that significant, could actually come through to this lifetime. You encounter the same person, and lo and behold, all the negative feelings start to be generated in them because they're suddenly exposed to you, and they start to behave in all sorts of strange and inexplicable and illogical ways. You think, what on earth's that person on? So this is really the goal that I want to get to with the past life work. What interests me is this: when human beings behave in a way which is illogical, irrational, or just plain apparently crazy, there is a reason for it. The reason is that they are being influenced, affected and guided by another lifetime. And this influence can be so strong, it can literally put them in the situation where they feel compelled to behave in certain ways. So what I would like to do to draw this all together is to, with our understanding of how much suffering there has been in the entire history of the human race, to realise that it's so wonderfully helpful to be able to have the universal soul retrieval, the universal karma release, and now the guilt and grief release processes for those people who had such a strong effect by their past lives, which are literally affecting them today. So, as I love to remind everyone, don't forget the place of our greatest power is right here, right now, in the present time. And if you are fully connected to your here and now, then don't bother with any shamanic processes, don't go near any healers, because you don't need them. But for those people who feel that they are still being held back, our service is available, and there are many other practitioners out there with also wonderful services available. So if you feel held back by illness, or by things you just can't explain, by weighty feelings, by just a sense of dread, a sense of not knowing what's wrong but knowing there's something wrong, a sense of lack of motivation, a complete lack of energy, depression, wanting to terminate your own life, these are all the classic indicators that you could do with some good shamanic healing and feel so much better from it, and get so much more in touch with the present here and now, and be able to live the life that you've always wanted to live. So look forward to hearing from you.